change in rural areas and how that, I know you work a lot with livestock producers.
Well, change is difficult and it's slow, and it probably should be slow so that the change that does occur is safe. You know, that we don't do something cataclysmically stupid and pay for it, which I think GMO is, but anyway. So, especially in agricultural communities where there's a lot of tradition and families have been on the land for a long, long time, and there's a social order to things, and having the support of their peer groups is very important. Just as I think the conservation community has peer groups, and small businesses have peer groups, and it's important for us to be accepted in the peer group that we feel the most affinity for. And I would much rather stand up in front of a hostile group of people that I do not consider my peer group than have a hostile crowd in my peers. And I think what a lot of the ranchers have found, and probably some farmers too, is that they become the enemy of their own people when they try to undertake some change, and that's a very, very difficult place to be. And in the process, what we are learning about change is that there's this bell curve of change, and right when the curve starts to move upward, are people called the innovators, and for whatever reason, they have within themselves a high motivation to make the change. Then there's another group that's watching those innovators closely, and they're feeling a lot of pressure to change too, but maybe not quite as much, and they're going to see how those innovators fare. If the innovators succeed, they are more likely to undergo the change as well, and they're called the early adopters. If those two groups succeed, then the sort of the rest, or some of the more innovators of the rest, begin to change, and then you really get a significant movement. And so one of the things that CNR tries to do is focus on those innovators and those early adopters and try everything that we can do to help them succeed and make this change as risk-free or reduced risk as possible, and also provide visible incentives so that they can stand up before their peer group, or help them create an alternative peer group that is supportive of what they're doing. Because having that peer support is really important. And the chemical companies understand this. We have a friend who's a ranch manager for a very large piece of land in the Boulder Valley, and he was approached by the people who produce Grazon. And Grazon is a kind of chemical that encourages the grass growth, and it kills everything else. And so they knew that his boss, very, very wealthy landowner, had the dollars to forego for this expensive product. And so they said, well, they lined him and dyed him, and that the thing he got it was that they were going to use him in their advertisement. So here's our friend who has a large ego, and he's going to get to be in their ads. Did he advocate to his new landowner? You bet he did. And that's the kind of stuff that they do all the time. And I don't think we never have the resources to do that. But I do think we have to learn that giving them some rewards and recognition are very, very important.
Let me tell you about a reward I got one time, and it's kind of you folks that can do this for a poor old grain farmer. Now, if you're like Josh and you're raising vegetables, you get this experience all the time, and that's customer appreciation. Because we never meet our customers as grain farmers. We never meet the end user. And I was at a food show one time in California, and this lady came up to me and just shook my hand just like this real hard, and she says, "Oh, thank you for growing food for my family." And I had never, ever been thanked for growing food for someone's family before. And it was an enormous high for me. It was better than money in the bank. It was a thank you. It changed my whole attitude about what I was doing on my farm. Most large grain farmers do not look at those fields of wheat as food for someone's family. We have been taught to think of grain as a commodity, and it's the most disservice you can do to food, to think of it as a commodity. It's much, much more than that, but yet as a commodity you don't feel bad about dousing it with all kinds of who knows what out of a can to kill bugs and weeds and every other thing. You don't think about other handling procedures that may be suspect. But when you think about it as a food that someone's going to eat, that changes your attitude, and to feel appreciated for that also is something that every farmer really feel good about. So that's a little payment I received.
I'll have to add just a quick story. In April, we brought in the chefs with the Chefs Collaborative, and one of them was Rick Bayless. He was a very famous chef in Chicago, has 2 big high-profile restaurants, and he said, don't you dare call food products or goods or commodities. Food is food, and that's how I look at it, and I want you to start thinking about what you produce as food and what you eat as food. And it was pretty neat to have the chef say that.
Hello, my name is Jeannie Moe, and I'm the director for Project Archaeology here in Bozeman, which is a national archaeology education program. And I'm currently doing research on the transition from hunting and gathering to agriculture, and then what that means in the present day. So that's 12,000 years of history right there in 2 sentences. But anyway, in the research that I've been doing, I ran across a book by a man by the name of Luther Tweeten from Ohio State University, and in the title are the words agricultural terrorism and agricultural populism. And I'm sorry, it's published this year, but I cannot remember the exact title. But what an agricultural terrorist is someone who, and this is what, and I urge you all to read it, but it's someone who criticizes modern industrial agriculture in any way, shape, or form. So I think, we probably all qualify, most of us in the room. But anyway, I was just absolutely struck and dumbfounded by that book, which was actually really well done. And I wondered if any of you had seen that, and if so, what you thought about it. And then maybe the second part of my question was anticipated by the last round of comments. But in this book, Mr. Tweeten also makes very strongly the statement that industrial agriculture is working and that we are feeding the world with it, and it is indeed the only answer if we are going to feed the entire world. So it seems to me that if we're ever going to get rid of those 4 corporations, we've got to get beyond that kind of thinking. So just questions and comments.
Well, just to follow up on your feeding the world thing, a couple years ago I had a wheat farmer tell me, he said, I just realized that not only am I not feeding the world, he said, I'm not feeding my neighbor. And for him, he was a conventional farmer. He's just trying to do some things a little bit different in his place. He started reading, probably Francis Morlepay, who knows. But and he came to that realization. He said, I've wasted 35 years of my life thinking I was helping to feed the world. And so I just want to make that comment.
Yeah, this whole, well, first of all, the book and the concept of food terror, several states have actually passed laws and put people in jail or fined people for disparaging the food supply. I'm serious. Montana has, California, Texas, a couple other states, to people who actually criticize agricultural practices. You're disparaging the food supply and subject to criminal liabilities. And these were, yeah, Oprah Winfrey is the prime example. But the whole thing of industrial agriculture and feeding the world is probably the single greatest myth that we suffer from collectively as a society here in the United States. I mean, somehow we think we are. I mean, we are not feeding the world with industrial agriculture. Out of the 6 billion people on the planet or so, something in the order of 1.5 billion people are chronically malnourished. I mean, we are not feeding the planet in any way, shape, or form. So it's the UN FAO does a big survey every couple of years about the state of the world's food security and things. And roughly 800 million people, 850 million by their last estimate, actually have some form of probably clinically significant malnutrition. We're not talking, missing a few vitamins, but who do not have enough calories in their daily diet. And that's criminal. And that's, most of those people live in rural areas, and most of the people live in rural areas in countries that export food. Okay, so this whole idea that industrial agriculture is necessary to feed the world is just PR. But this woman got up and explained these people, all the companies, all donate money to this organization. And she got up and explained that how, the biotechnology industry really blew it in Europe, particularly Monsanto. They were internally critical of Monsanto for trying to just force this stuff on Europe. And the Europeans rebelled and didn't want it. And so she said, what she did is described in great and infinite detail in an hour-long presentation to this group what they were going to do to sell GMO crops to the American public. She talked about the focus groups they did, the advertising campaigns, the surveys, all the classical, she's a marketing person, all the classical stuff of high-powered marketing. And she said what they found out was surprising, that Americans really care about feeding the world, so that's how we'll sell GMO crops. This is the single most cynical thing I've ever heard in my life. And we've been hearing it ever since. This whole thing in California, Sacramento, where the Department of Agriculture and the corporations brought everybody from the poor countries of the world into California, to Sacramento, to have this big conference. Well, that's because Andy Denham used a lot of public money to put that on. That's part of this whole marketing. We're being systematically sold the idea that you've got to have industrial agriculture and genetically modified crops to feed the world, and it's bunk. And we need to deal with it on that level. And so if you take away nothing else from this kind of digression here, that hunger is not a function of the world's food supply, it's a function of poverty. And will answer all of that in any debate you may end up with some of these people. And the one other really cynical example was in Cancun, at the WTO. There was a little sideshow I read about, where an organization called the Committee for something Tomorrow, I don't know, one of these right-wing business front foundations brought a bunch of GMO food and was giving it to poor, destitute farmers or families in a little village not far from Cancun. And they got all upset because Greenpeace and some other folks were objecting to giving away GMO food. And so they're saying now that Greenpeace and all of us folks are Luddites that are in the way of feeding the world. And so here you are in Mexico, and it's true, the people that they were giving this food to needed it. I mean, there's hunger and poverty in Mexico that's just staggering, and it's getting worse by the day. And so these people really are hungry. So you go to Mexico, and their solution, here's people who have no land, no jobs, they're surplus to the localized system, and they're supposed to wait for sort of young Republicans to bring them some genetically modified cattle food, and be grateful for it. That's plan A. But you got to ask the question, here's Mexico, which now provides roughly half of all the fresh packed vegetables in the United States. Why are there hungry people in Mexico? And the reason there's hungry people in Mexico is because of NAFTA. This is not some mysterious thing. That North American Free Trade Agreement has total Mexican agriculture. And people who used to own land are now picking tomatoes, and they don't make enough money in a day picking tomatoes seasonally to buy food. And that's what's happened in Mexico. And it's happened all over the world. So we've got to deal with, Mont Barlow up there was actually talking about some of these forces that we've got to deal with those international institutions to end poverty. And then people will have enough to eat. I mean, we need some fair trade. Montana needs some, this needs to go both ways. I mean, we need to have organizations or marketing structures where we can trade wheat to Honduras for bananas, but where farmers on both ends make a living at it. Not subsidized here and just sort of impoverished on the other end. And we need to take control of those systems.
Just piggyback on that a little bit. All these things are coming through my head and I scrawled them down and you pretty much said all of it. I'm just going to say it anyway. So,
probably more eloquent.
I don't know. You speak pretty well. Industrial agriculture in the United States feeds cows. Who eats the cows? We eat the cows. We're not ending global hunger by feeding cows that people in the United States eat. 30% of us are obese. Industrial agriculture outside the United States grows commodities for the first world to eat. For the European Union, for the United States, for the wealthy countries in Latin America. That's not where the hunger is. To say that industrial agriculture feeds the world is wrong. Industrial agriculture feeds us, and we don't need it. Industrial agriculture doesn't ameliorate poverty. Industrial agriculture creates poverty. People become landless as the land they used to use for self-sufficient farms gets consolidate, then becomes large farms that grow export commodities for, who guess it, us. Now, if you were a farmer on that land and you were poor but you were self-sufficient, now you got nothing to do. If you don't have any land, like Cliff just said, if you have no land and you have no money, you're hungry. It doesn't matter how much grain the United States produces. Here you go.
Yes, and I already asked one of the Smithsonian guys and asked if there's a
Okay.
I'm Lynn Kelly. I'm from Polson, Montana. I teach 7th grade life science. I'm a wildlife biologist, and I am 2 generations removed from the land, but my heart, along with a lot of my family on both sides, is there. I guess the thing, I'm going to have to sit down because I just covered up my notes here. The thing that has troubled me, first of all, before I get into that, I do have a cousin in Cascade who has Scottish Highland cattle and sheep that are grass-fed and organic. So if anybody's interested, you can look them up on the internet.
Is that Kittredge's?
Yes, Cindy and Jim.
They're also in the Abundant Montana directory downstairs at the Arrow booth.
Oh, cool. Yes, I'm very proud of that.
Just grab a director.
And I listen to my dad, especially. My mom's people are still on the land in Circle and in eastern Montana, but my dad speaks of dirt farmers, and I can hear almost the schizophrenia in his voice. On the one hand, there's the dirt farmer, you know, you're a failure if you go back to the farm, you're a failure if you stay on the farm, blah, blah, blah. And then years later, he circled around, you know, as an electrical engineer, and was involved in aerospace, and then came back around to agriculture late in his life, and was very sorry he left it in the first place. But I guess I'm trying to figure out how, and then I just heard you guys talk about the fact that, you know, even today people are telling their kids, don't come back to the land, don't come back to the land. At the same time, we have an aging farmer population. There has to be, and I'm really excited about what Josh spoke of, there has to be some way to encourage students through, I mean, I'm a 4-H'er, I know FFA, there's got to be some other ways to encourage the young people to go back to the land. And, you know, I don't know how to do that, but as a teacher, I know that I always bring up, you know, and support the farming and ranching industries in Polson in the area there. But, so that's the first point. The second point is that, you know, along with that, you know, don't be just a dirt farmer idea, comes the loss of connectedness. You know, you go into the city, you're in an asphalt jungle, you have no clue where your milk comes from. It comes from a carton, it doesn't come from a cow. So Josh, maybe you have some insights there. Is there something we can do? Is there some kind of a program that, you know, should there be a class where, you know, in junior high or high school where kids go work on a farm for something?
Well, there's a couple things jump to mind right away. One thing we might want to do is start thinking like Ann Benjamin. It's a marketing issue. So what do people care about? And then you have to link whatever you're trying to sell them to what they care about, and they'll get excited about it. So on the university level, it's obviously different than what you're talking about. People are caring about the possibility for sustainability and the long-term health of the earth. When we tie food to that, then they want to be involved with food. So with the kids, tied to what they care about. One thing people might be caring about on the flathead is how their valley has changed so much and how it's continuing to change really quickly. If farmers stay on the land, it'll still be a beautiful place. If farmers don't stay on the land, that land's going to be filled up with strip malls and tract housing, and everything people love about it will slowly erode and go away. So they get it to tie into that. Should also bring them over to Mission Mountain Market and let them see how alive and happening that is and how people are taking advantage of it. People love to be involved with something that's successful, and nobody wants to try and save the sinking ship. So this has got to be join the winning team. I think every school should have a garden. Every school should have a garden. Every school should be producing some of the food that they eat. And then kids grow that food. They're really going to be excited about eating it. And they're going to be aware that it came from somewhere. Then when they go to the grocery store, they'll ask where it came from. My kids live this horrible, sheltered, isolated existence in our farm. Don't know much about the world. A few times we go out to dinner, there's a salad. My 3-year-old daughter always says, Mom, is this your lettuce or did Lucy grow it? I don't know. In her world, Kim and Lucy grow all the lettuce. But it's really great that she asked that question, and all kids should ask that question. Where did this food come from? So if they start growing some of it, they'll be aware that it came from somewhere. And if people start asking in every grocery store, where did this come from? The people who buy it, who supply it, who buy it for the stores, will start having to come up with good answers. We buy it from here and there. Now, obviously, these are big challenges in places with not much population and short growing seasons. But as great farmer Steve Elliott says, we're a smart bunch of monkeys. If we decide that this is what we want to do, we can do it. We pretty much, as a species, been really successful at everything we've collectively decided we wanted to do. And if we collectively decide that we want to grow our own food and be more sustainable and treat the earth better, it's not that hard. We can do it.
The only thing I can add to that, and I thought those were great ideas, is to invite someone in your school that's had some success. If you're close to Josh, invite somebody who's close to where you are, because they can relate to that. Don't invite someone 500 miles away, because that's how you get to be an expert. You speak more than 50 miles away, right? But invite, and there's enough now, and maybe the Aero director would be a source, but maybe the Aero could have a speaking pool too for you. But to get speakers into school would be great. And for those that are really in the cold country and the garden doesn't even get planted before school's out, greenhouses are also an excellent way to get kids started. Even my son brought home a little plant from school. They started in a window, so he could plant it in the garden. We did. He brought some seeds that his teacher had given him from the biggest pumpkin in the county, and we had fun planting that. So there's things that could be done that they could incorporate and take home for the summer.
There is a ag in the classroom, and then Arrow actually has a sustainable ag in the classroom curriculum from 1 to 5th or 6th grade. You might be interested in it. And it comes with a trunk of activities. And the other thing I would mention is we've worked with, over the years, a whole bunch of different schools on starting gardens for their schools. And so if anybody wanted a list of where those school gardens are, they're dotted all over the state. There's probably a whole lot more than the folks we worked with several years ago. And they did things like pizza gardens and all kinds of fun stuff. They did art in the garden. And I think you're right. A really good connection for you, Ray and Polson, is Janet Wiltusi, who you probably know.
If you're doing this at schools, gardening isn't off on its own. Not only are you growing food for the school to eat, for kids to eat, but it's a great place to teach science, it's a great place to teach art, it's a great place to do any kind of reflection or creative writing, anything. It's a great medium, and so it can be sold to administrators as a really low-cost way to do new and exciting things. And you could also produce something for your local food bank or food pantry, so the kids feel like they're giving back and they're tied into the community, or growing flowers for old folks' homes. There's all sorts of ways to take your endeavor and tie it to the community, which makes administrators and local politicos think it's a really nifty thing, and you don't even have to say the O word. You can just be doing this good thing.
The other question that you bring up about getting people on land, I think that folks that want to get on land these days have got to be really creative. And Bob mentioned that you can't buy a farm today. I mean, an individual that's wanting to farm either has to have really deep pockets from somewhere, or one of the things that I've seen more recently is people have banded together to buy property. In fact, our farm is really owned by 5 or 6 people have invested in my 45-year-old fantasy. And but anyway, I think people have to be really creative about how they get on land. And there's lots of different models out there. And a whole bunch of people that we know, Andy Sponseller, and his neighbors.
One other model for this land is really expensive right now, but because we've got this sprawl issue, conservation easements are really popular. You can farm on a conservation easement and you don't have to buy the land. And people are really glad you're doing it. In fact, it makes even Republicans happy because the land isn't locked up, it's still economically viable and still produces producing money, creating jobs, etc.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Chris Foyker. I'm a senior at FSU. Ecology and evolution is my degree. So my question is going to address the broader kind of political economic structures that we are embedded within. And Cliff, you've talked about it and said, sustainability goes much beyond just biology, it's politics also. And I think a lot of the solutions that we're talking about does get at that. It does address how we, what you just said, Cliff, we need to take control of the systems. And so, my basic question is, how are we going to do that? Because I think, the systems that we're embedded within right now are inherently unsustainable. The way power is distributed, the way, the economic relationships between countries, between people, the scales that we're working on, I think it's inherently unsustainable. So my question would be, this is to all of you, if you could outline an alternative, and we have been doing that slowly throughout this conference, but if you could outline, an alternative, system, an alternative structure, and then not only outline it, but also how could we move towards that? What ways can we, besides the things that we're talking about here, which I think oftentimes are just marginalizing that lifestyle, just kind of pushing it to the margins. What ways can we take control of that system and make it the way that we want it? That's my question.
I'm going to say one small thing. That's a really hard question. What do you have to answer me? Last week, I heard Jack Kloppenberg, a rural sociologist from Wisconsin, come talking in Missoula. It was really inspiring. One of the things he said was, he mentioned something about those bumper stickers, think locally, act globally, think locally, act locally, all that kind of stuff. So what we do on a local level, what we should be doing, are creating relationships that we would wish to see mimicked out farther and beyond our locale. So when we are acting locally, we're acting globally. So it's kind of hokey and corny, but this does work. Create the kinds of relationships around food. Food is the first easy one because it connects all of us. Right in your life. And if it's working, if you're smiling, other people are going to mimic that. She talked about the early adopters and all that. Create relationships locally that we'd like to see mimicked globally. That's a small start. I don't know any other way to chip away at the giant system. One other little thing has come to mind, and it'll be done. A long time ago, when I was in regular undergraduate school, I read an essay by this guy, Adam Michnik. I think he was from Poland, and this was before the wall had fallen and when Poland was still under the arm of the former Soviet Union. And this fellow, Adam Michnik, was a playwright, and he and some other dissidents had been angry about the lack of free speech and expression, and they were really angry, and things weren't going right. And then they decided one day that they were just going to start living as if things were the way they wished they were. And as soon as they did that, it was like the sun came out. And lo and behold, it caught on. And then Prague fell, and the wall fell, and all sorts of other things happened. And these guys didn't start it, but there were a whole bunch of other co-developments that happened. But if you, right now, start living as if things were the way you wish they were, they would become that way for you right now.
I actually spend a lot of time at 3:30 in the morning thinking about that question. It's something that I think is really important for us to figure out. And I don't have answers for everyone, but I think I have some answers for myself. At least one of the things is I have to keep hope in my heart. If I lose hope, then I stop my action, and then the possibility for me to make a difference in the world, a positive difference, just stops. And I might as well take the knife and slit my throat and be done with it. Because I'll only be a pull on this world, and I don't want that. So my first thing is to not be overwhelmed by it. And part of what keeps me from not being overwhelmed is to recognize that what I want in this world is desired by millions of people in this world, billions of people in this world, and that all over the world, in little pockets, there are people like us gathering and trying to make a change. And we never hear about it because our media is not focused on the good and wonderful things that are happening in the world. They are very focused on all the terrible things that are happening to the corporate interests of the United States. And so I've been lucky in my life to have gone to Europe once to meet with State of Light folks and to stay somewhat connected and know that there are people all over the world that desire to do what I desire. And so I don't feel so alone. The second thing is that only 38% of voters voted in the last election, and and it was 50-50, or some would contend it was better than that. But the country is deeply divided. But only 19% of voters actually created the administration and the policies that this administration has brought to bear. That's not a very big percentage of people. And that's because so many people are not participating in the democratic process of voting. So another thing that I think is really central into it is that we have to participate. We have to be citizens of a democracy and participate. And man, I'm tired at the end of the day, and I'm overwhelmed, and there's a lot to process. But I have made a commitment that I'm going to try very hard to understand what the driving forces are behind the people who are running for office, and I'm going to try to make the best decision I can, as an informed decision as I can, because that's part of my responsibility as a citizen in this country. And it is an important thing that we can do. The other thing is that people are not drawn to negative or painful experience very often. I mean, there's some of us that are gluttons for punishment and will show up at the most contentious ugly meetings, and we'll do that because God knows where. Yeah, right. Yeah. But most people are not, and most of us, I think, are overwhelmed. There's so much to do, and we have so little free time, and there's lots of activities out there to pull on our free time, to get us to spend time doing whatever they want us to do, and a lot of them are fun. And I think what we have to do is make this stuff fun, because we're competing against basketball games that have all these lights flashing and stuff. A lot of fun activities, and what we do is fun. I mean, it is fun, and we need to make it fun, and we need to make it a celebration of the good that is going on in the world, so we inspire people and we don't scare people. Scaring people puts them into the woodwork, withdraws them from the process, and the last thing we need is for people to withdraw from this process of democracy. So I would say that practicing democracy and making some commitments and not forgetting that we're part of a much bigger movement that is powerful in the energy that it creates is a way to solve the problem.
I mean, it's a combination of the political, the biology, and the social. And we have a chance in Montana to be an example here. And if Montana, as I said earlier, it's still small enough that we can. I mean, if you want to know who is being difficult in the Montana Senate Agriculture Committee about GMO wheat, Joan and I can give you their names and addresses. I mean, these people need to be held accountable, and we can do that. There's not that many of us. There's not that, and there's some people there who need to learn what's in the interest of the people of the state. And they may have to learn through losing an election. That would help. And there's some other local, what Montana needs to do for two reasons. One, to be an example of what you could do for the rest of the world, and one for our own survival, is Montana needs to declare itself a GMO-free state. Advertise to the world that we have, big sky, pure as the driven snow wheat, and they will pay us for it. Taking control of our research sounds pretty vague, but let me give you an example. About a month ago, I went to one of the ag days at one of the experiment stations. I won't say which one or who, but and you travel on a little tractor and you talk to the ag research going on at Montana State University Ag Experiment Station. There was a guy there who was doing some work on on soybeans. You know, we don't grow any soybeans in this state. We do now a few. But they bred some soybeans that actually can fit our climate. We grow them in the Yellowstone Valley. And the varieties that are good for direct human consumption. There's varieties that are bred to make good tofu and soybeans and soy milk. And this guy got up and presented that. It's all really wonderful because this is an alternative crop and an alternative market. And he said, if we just had this Roundup gene in this stuff, we could save a nickel. And I almost went out of my mind. You know, this guy's going to take something that he could sell for a $250 premium over the price of soybeans. We're far enough away from Iowa that it can't get contaminated. And this could be what silk, the people who make organic soy milk, they can't find enough organic soybeans because they're all contaminated. They'll pay $7 a bushel for this stuff. And this guy's going to make it $2.50 cattle food. You know, we have got to change that attitude. You know, we need to go talk to these people. You know, they're not way off in the distance. They're up here on 11th Avenue, you know. And so there's some things like that that we need to really work on. Organizations like Arrow, you know, I mean, we need to go talk to Ralph Peck, ag guy. He's the ag commissioner for the state. We need to sit down and talk to him about some of these things. You know, why are we going to take a crop we could actually sell for a premium and turn it into cattle food? That doesn't make a lot of sense, but for some reason it does to some people. And so there's specific, and it's, you know, it's hard work. You can't, you know, you got to come home from work and you're right. You come home from work and you're tired and you got to participate in politics. That's tough, but it can also be sort of fun, you know, if you win a few. And if you lose a few, you get to go out afterward with nice folks and have a beer and commiserate, you know.
I have a couple thoughts on your question. Where'd you go? Again, I want you to remember this name, John Tester. Because someday, we hope he'll run for governor of Montana. And he passed the organic law that allowed the Department of Agriculture to institute a program. Can I do this on public TV here? To institute an organic program. So that it became part of Department of Agriculture's menu of programs. He and Quinn here got a resolution passed last year on the GMO issue that we would not, I should let you say this, but we would not introduce GMO wheat into Montana until we had secured markets for it. And you know, when I think about this huge infrastructure problem, you know, how are we going to combat that? We need really good leaders. And we need, and John's already out there. He's a legislator right now today. But, and he's just one example. There's lots of other great leaders. But we need great leaders in positions of power who can help us at that state level and even at the federal level. And you just can't underestimate the amount of good work that can be done by folks like that. And Kucinich is another example at the federal level, really making people think about a whole range of things. The other thought I had on your question was, we really should be asking, here who asked the question, who's studying anthropology. You know, this is a question about how societies change and grow and fall. And I've talked to lots of people who said, hey, let's just step aside, let's quit creating alternatives. Let's not stand in the way of destruction. Let's just go home, let's farm, let's keep our head low, and let that thing roll right over the top of us, what's happening in our world. And I'd ask the anthropologist if, I don't know how societies change, or if it does have to happen in order for us to regrow from something that's more people-based. I really don't know the answer myself.
Well, that goes back to one of the speakers this morning talking about those societies that survive are the ones that participate, and those that don't are the ones that don't anticipate, they don't survive. So.
The frustration that I sometimes see is that people are unwilling to consider change. Cliff's idea about GMO-free zone was something we kicked around the legislation for this last one, so 2.5 years ago. And John Tester and I are neighbors, so we're good friends. And so we're always putting our heads together and trying to figure out how we're going to go around the back door because the front one is guarded by, guns this big. And so we proposed a state resolution at the last legislature that would fund a study, it's 2.5 years ago one, to ask the question to our customers, would our customers buy more or pay more if Montana were a GMO-free zone? And I even got this resolution through the Farm Bureau, State Farm Bureau meeting here, because it was hard to argue against asking your customers what they would prefer. Yet, when it got to the legislature, the bill was completely squashed by people coming in and not speaking to the bill at all. No one spoke to the bill. John led off and I spoke, and then that was the last time you heard the bill mentioned. The whole discussion went into a battle between the good and bad about GMOs. So it just went down in burning flames. But never underestimate the opposition, but also never underestimate the power of a few who are consistently bringing up issues. And if you would go to early on, when candidates hold public meetings, go and ask them these kind of questions, and both parties. No, this should be a party issue, the GMO question and the future of agriculture. It's a state issue. One of the reasons that we have so much funding from companies like Monsanto and Montana State University is because the state is not doing it. Who is going to support it? The state legislature is not forking out the money that they need to support this kind of thing. Federal government emphasis is not in this area. But how many of us are writing letters to our legislators or our congressmen in case of USDA funds, asking for funds to be channeled at least in the sustainable areas and not just looking at biotech? How many times we write letters to the editor? There was a program on the TV last week when everyone said that sure they'd eat GMO. It feels too good if they did. How about 50 people wrote a letter into the paper and says, I do not want to eat GMO grain and I don't want to feed it to my family. What kind of effect would that have? That would have an enormous effect. And it could be done by a very few, very, very small number. And also those of you that are already shopping and buying organic food, that's an enormous goal with your dollars. It's really helping. And it's beginning to happen. The change is beginning to happen. And we just need to be telling our story and not just talking to each other all the time, which is fun. But we need to make sure that we are available to talk to schools, to talk to university classes, to speak up at farm organizations so that they know that there's alternatives and they're successful, so that they're not just talking about how we're going to get more federal money, but how we can do something different, something that's sustainable, something that can make a difference in the state.
Hi, my name is Seth Friedman. I'm from the University of Montana Environmental Studies program.
Yeah.
My question is, you spoke about the possibility of contamination from GMOs. I was wondering about the possibility of contamination from neighboring farmers practicing conventional farming, herbicides, pesticides, if that was a danger to organic farmers or not.
Oh yeah, that's been one of the real big issues in organic farming, is just pesticide drift through your neighbors. Where in Montana where you've got big acreages, but you go to California and the organic, I've done a lot of work with organic growers in California. That's probably their #1 issue, is trying to keep the neighbors from spraying their crop. And you add pollinators to that and you've got a real mess. It's probably the biggest single issue facing the organic world is how to manage it.
You are required to have buffers, but obviously 50 feet isn't very big. You also, on our place, we just have really good relationships with our neighbors. They all know we're organic. We work with them on when they're changing their cropping system. We change ours so that it lessens the drift. We're also planting really large hedgerow around our crop acres. We have a road in between us. There's lots of things organic farmers, we do. We take it on ourselves to protect the crop, to ensure that it gets to the customers clean as we possibly can. Bob, you're in a
I think
different
probably
situation.
almost every organic farmer has been drifted on or sprayed on. And now, at least in our neighborhood, there's a big awareness of who the organic farmers are, and people spray when the wind is blowing the other way, so that there isn't the possibility of drift. In most cases, I had a situation where my field actually got sprayed because the farmer didn't describe his farm good enough, and the pilot was spraying my organic wheat, and he thought it was spraying the neighbors conventionally. And in those cases, of course, no one has any bonding or insurance to cover the loss. So and those are the days where we were selling to California, which had a 1-year rule, which means 1 year off of chemicals. You can sell it for organic in California. So since he didn't have any money and any insurance, I made this guy go organic for 2 years. That was the punishment. And so he replaced my lost crop with a similar amount of acres on his farm where he didn't spray for 2 years. And I was hoping maybe he'd get excited about it, but he didn't. But it was a try. But anyway, it is a problem. It is a problem, and it's one that I think people are even becoming more aware of. It still happens, and it has to be monitored all the time.
We've got 4 minutes. Who has a burning question?
Just a quick one. I grew up in town, and so talking to a meat cutter about how to identify how to cut up my cow or my calf by talking in terms of cuts of meat, I had to find an old cookbook in order to make that happen. My question watching you is, at my household, my husband grew up in the country here in Montana, and shows that we watch religiously on Sunday include Market to Market and Montana Ag Live. When will we see some of you on Montana Ag Live?
I think you have to be invited.
Yeah. We're not being flooded with invitations.
I think we need a new program.
If you had asked at Ag Live that question, that would be a very good question to ask them. And that's how you start to get change. If they even have an idea that there was customer interest, and in this case the customer who's ever turned on the TV, you see them, has an interest in this, you can bet that they'll respond to that interest. They want to provide what's going to be looked at. If a dozen people called up or 50 people called up, that'd be a big amount. You can bet that there'd be some invitations going on.
Yeah, I mean, there's, we work at it. Errol does a lot of speaking with other people. I mean, there's venues and things you can, Ag Live may be a little bit of a long shot at this point, but there are some, Josh and I actually got to speak at a National Science Foundation program in Missoula earlier this summer at the University Hall, the scientific trappings, and got to talk about this stuff. And we reached a lot of people with it. And it's just, pushing. What I had an idea, Joe, that, Arrow did a really good set of farm tours this summer, and Jim Barn Growers here, and I think you did a lot of that with Jim. I think that Arrow ought to do a legislative tour. When you go to the hearing, to the Senate Ag Committee, we're talking about GMO crops. I don't know, it was 10 of us, and a whole bunch of guys in suits on the other side of the aisle. But if this group right here actually sat down at the Senate Ag Committee, and when they were talking, they would be squirming. Just 50 people at one of those hearings would really upset the balance. I mean, you're in there, and it's hard to do because they've got professional lobbyists, right? People who do this full time, occupy that place. But we can turn out a few people every once in a while. But I think an organized tour of ag policy at the legislature, that's what Arrow, let's work on that. Yeah, and other groups, your own organization, make it a coalition, This affects poverty organizations, women's organizations, everybody here has got a stake in having viable agricultural communities in this state. And we're losing them really fast. And so we need to band together and go ask for change. And, if 100 people showed up in front of the Senate Ag Committee, and even if only 10 of them talked, and it was obvious that the other 90 were applauding politely at the right time, they would figure it out. Maybe. You might have to do it more than once, but at some point, it doesn't take that many people working on it to really make a change. You just get enough of them to make them a little nervous.
it's fewer letters going to Washington. It's very few right. Makes a big impact. 2 letters make a big impact.
I'm sorry to say we are.
I have a quick question. I don't know if you guys did this or not. Could you kind of sum up in the next 6 months or 9 months some events that are going on, some meetings, Marrow meetings, anything, sustainability, attending affairs?
I can tell you a couple meetings. Arrow's annual meeting is at Chico Hot Springs on November 1st and 2nd. Our keynote speaker is Sarah Vogel. She's the task Commissioner of Agriculture in North Dakota. She sued the federal government during the farm crisis and won at the Supreme Court to change Farmers Home Administration rules about foreclosure. She currently is working on GMO issues as well. She's just an amazing woman. She helped start the cooperative movement in North Dakota with farmers, helping them get local funds for doing value added, so they call themselves macaroni farmers now instead of wheat farmers. That's our keynote speaker. In fact, Dave Christensen is going to be a speaker. He's the guy that introduced himself earlier. He has spent 31 years devoting his life's work to feeding mountain corn, which you might have heard him on Yellowstone Public Radio a few months ago. He did a great interview there. He's going to be one of our speakers. Cliff Bradley is going to be there talking about GMOs. What's your title? Something, publicity stunts and something else. It'll be fun.
Yeah.
Steve Elliott and David Oyen will be there talking about Beyond Organic. And it goes back to the point about societies assess current situations and anticipate changes needed. Lots of the organic farmers in Montana are starting to talk about, okay, if Kraft has bought into organic, it's time to move on. And so one of the big discussions we'll have there is about Beyond Organics. Where are we going next? And anyway, I have, down at the booth is a program for that meeting. It will be really fun. The awesome Polo Bags are going to dance the night away with us. We also have other energy. We have energy building kinds of talks. One of our farmers has just put up a wind turbine on his place. He's going to talk about that. And then on December 3rd, 4th, and 5th, in Great Falls, is our 2 organic conferences. And one is particularly designed for people who are just learning about organic systems and ag service providers like NRCS and Extension. The second one is for, it's going to be a little bit more radical of a meeting, and it's been designed by farmers and ranchers from across the state. And it's more for folks who already have the basics down on organics. And you can ask me about that information too. Anybody else have upcoming stuff? You should, another thing you might be interested in is University of Montana has a lecture series every fall. Do you know more about that, Josh? The one that Levi has. The Jack Popular Account. Okay, sorry. Last fall they had a workshop, they had a speaker series. Okay, that's fine, okay.
There's another meeting coming up, and this, on first blush, is not going to sound at all connected to Montana agriculture, but it is. On November 13th, Kristen Collegian, is that the right name? Bozeman here. There's a good friend of mine from Missoula who spent 2 months in Colombia accompanying people, labor leaders and farm organizers in Colombia who are under death threats for opposing the government. And, we're justifying this whole thing in Colombia as, stopping drugs and all that kind of stuff. And Colombia, people in Colombia grow cocoa because the price of coffee is 20 cents a pound at the port of export. And they can't make a living. And so, it's the same thing going on with wheat or corn or anything else. If it's a commodity traded broadly in the world, the price has been in the tank for the last 10 years, and if you're a farmer, you can't make a living. And so we're basically, in the United States, government and the State Department's private Air Force is waging a war by spraying Roundup on 700,000 hectares of Colombia at this point. And, to start understanding some of these connections, this would be a good thing to come and listen to, I think. It's 7 p.m. On Thursday, November 13th. And, it's about an hour of slides and
that applicable?
I think the place is called the Christian Collegium. It's right up near campus. Is that my pronunciation? Somebody from Bozeman help me out here.
On Saturday?
Yeah.
Chris is.
Yeah, thank you. Say that again.
First word is Chris, the second. Collegian. Second Sunday, South 8th and Alderston.
And, these things, this is where the intersections are, is with this kind of stuff. I did a lot of work in Colombia in flower production. 60% of the cut flowers in the United States come from Colombia and Ecuador. I'm serious. They load 747s in Bogota and fly roses to Miami. And farm workers were dying from pesticide poisoning in plastic greenhouses. And we did some work with these folks, and they've done a lot to fix this on their own. So these issues are really connected, and probably useful to learn about some of this stuff. Definitely, it's difficult to sit through this. I mean, this is some really horrific stuff going on in Colombia. But I recommend it.
The Corporation for the Northern Rockies will be doing two trainings on ranching profitability over the winter, and we're still in the process of organizing where and the dates for that. We'll also be doing the celebrity chef dinner and cooking classes again this spring, bringing in some of the nationally famous chefs to raise profile about the importance of Montana food for consumers here. And then also we'll have cooking classes with these chefs. And they're very fun, and they show us how to prepare things in a great way. And we're hoping to bring Michelle Nishan, who was featured today on the Bioneers, one of the presentations. And they said his name. It's Michelle Nishan, and he's just finished this great cookbook called Food Pure and Simple, I think is what it's called. And, anyway, he's a wonderful, wonderful person, and he should be a delight to have as a keynote. We will also be organizing the 5th annual Sustainability Fair, and that will be July 10th in Livingston. And we have the products and services, a whole range of products and services that are sustainably produced. And so for about the next 9 months, that's what we're up to, and we hope that you'll join us for those events. Pardon? It's July 10th, and we have information about it at our booth. Oh, also we're launching the Sustainability Marketplace on our website, so if you want to just keep an eye on the producers that are coming on, and if you want to buy products, you can do that through that website. And our website is www.northrock.org, and it's right there on the opening page. You'll see Sustainability Marketplace.